Megan, if you can give a piece of advice to residential appraisers out there who might be on the fence about getting their SRA designation, what would that be?
It feels like we are at a point where we're not going to be as necessary to some of the processes that we have been in the past. And the answer to relevancy is always the same. Make yourself invaluable. Set yourself apart. It is a profession. So if you want to make it a career and make money at it, you have to invest your time and your energy and your brain power. I absolutely recommend that you become a member of a professional organization and surround yourself with the best minds in the business. It makes you a better appraiser.
I feel the same exact way in that before getting my SRA, I felt like being an appraiser was a job. And then after, based on the community that I'm now a part of, it feels like a profession. That's a perfect way of putting it. Welcome, everyone. I'm Warren Boizot, co-host of Face Value, a podcast from the Appraisal Institute. For those listeners who don't already know, the Appraisal Institute is the leading professional association of real estate appraisers. At the center of AI's mission and what drives the content we produce here on Face Value is educating and empowering real estate appraisers.
That's right, Warren. And I'm Tonya Vailas, co-host of Face Value and a member of the board of directors of the Appraisal Institute. I can tell you the Appraisal Institute offers the gold standard when it comes to credentialing in our industry. Our designated members hold MAI, SRPA, SRA, AIGRS, AIRS, SREA, and RM designations. Sounds like a soup of letters.
Yes, it does.
But these designations signify a level of integrity for appraisers in our community. So on today's episode, we thought we'd talk a little bit about the process with a recent designee.
And we think we've got the perfect person to do that. We are very excited today to be joined by newly minted SRA designated real estate appraiser, Megan Judd. She has over 30 years of experience as an appraiser with a focus on litigation support, including bankruptcy and divorce. She's recently joined the Appraisal Institute's chapter leadership, where she manages the newsletter and works to expand engagement among residential real estate appraisers. Megan, welcome to Face Value.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Megan. Now I have a question for you. You have been appraising for what I heard to be about 30 years. Why all of a sudden did you have an interest in getting designated?
Well, I think it might be that I'm a good example to have on here because it wasn't all of a sudden. I think like many appraisers, I grew up in an office and was trained by an appraiser who didn't value, as you called it, the alphabet soup. That's exactly what it was referred to in our offices. But it was a standard production office. I learned a lot. My supervisor was great, but it really was just a lender catered production office. And so when I left that office after many years of working there and went out on my own, I really began to think about how I could set myself apart from my competition. And so I actually joined AI probably back in 2011. So almost 14 years ago. And my involvement was very, very spotty. And it basically wasn't until the last year or two when one of my biggest clients, who happens to be a local appraiser who owns an appraisal management company who sends me a lot of work, he really just started to encourage me to wrap it up. Like, you're so close, finish it up. And so, it really was a lengthy process. It wasn't just a brand new decision. But I'm a mother of 3 children and running a business with my husband and doing all of these other things and getting them through school and all of that it takes, to have a family. And so it just took me a really, really long time to be able to dedicate the time and to find that passion outside of the exhaustion.
I feel you. I'm a mother of 2, and I don't think I would have been able to get my designation after I had children. It was a very long and tedious process, and I don't think I could have done both. So I give you a lot of credit for doing it after you had children.
Thank you. Yeah, I really did have to push it. I would say if I joined in 2011, my kids would have been 9, 7, and 5 at that point. And that would have been right when things got a little crazy for us as a family, because that was about the time that all three of them were diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. And so that wound up pretty much usurping all of the extra time that I had. But I enjoyed what I was getting out of AI, especially from an education standpoint, that I just kept limping along. Maybe it was one class a year. Maybe there was a whole year that I didn't take any classes towards my designation. But I just still kept the affiliation, because even from the smallest interactions, I felt the charge, the professionalism, and the concreteness and the depth of the education. That's so much far beyond what you get off of just, the big internet guys.
Yeah, Megan, my path is kind of similar to yours in that I had about 15 years under my belt before I even thought of joining the Appraisal Institute. And it's a great decision that I made, but similar to you, it was a client that kind of pushed me and said, hey, we can give you these more complex assignments, but we kind of would like to see you get your SRA designation. So that pushed me as well. So very similar story.
Yeah.
Was it always that you were on the residential path, or did you ever think of doing some commercial work at all?
I have considered it a couple of times, just from the standpoint of, after so many years of doing the same thing over and over again, like, would I like to take this further in that direction? But no, I have to say that my personality really is a much better fit for residential, for the length of time that goes into each report. I'm definitely a very set them up and knock them down kind of person, not from a production standpoint, but just from an interest standpoint. I can be distracted very easily. So I like the smaller size of the projects. And while I had thought about going back and getting my general, I really felt like I would be better pressed, especially after having as much experience as I have had, in dialing in my focus on residential appraisal work and just becoming the expert that I can where that is concerned. And I have to say, in running into commercial appraisers in the courtroom, I find and have found that they're doing a lot of commercial work and they're a little rusty on their residential work sometimes. And it really gives me an advantage that even though they're educated beyond the scope of my education, I think I can more appropriately say that I'm more of a residential expert than a general who is only occasionally doing residential work. Because why would they do residential work if they've got ample commercial?
I think, Tony, what I heard Megan say was that she is one of the fun ones.
Is that a residential appraiser? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying, if you've got a room full of residential and commercial, we know who to gravitate toward.
You're right about that. I know I generally tend to gravitate towards commercial appraisers. It's just because I think you have more similarities with each other. You have the same clients, same type of mindset where, you see the bigger picture differently. Megan, I have another question. You're from Florida, and I know there's challenges with state licensing in Florida, especially with reciprocity from other states, because it's a big, it's a state where a lot of Northerners like to go. And I know they've had a lot of restrictions in Florida to try to get reciprocity in. But as an appraiser in Florida, did you have a hard time entering the industry and getting your initial license before your designation?
I didn't, but I don't know that the hoops I had to jump through 30 years ago were quite the same as what they are now. I was already working in an appraisal office. I got my foot in the door the way that all of the ladies my age did. We started out as office managers and worked our way up. And so I was working in an appraisal office already when my boss recommended that I go to school. And so I did that instead. So I probably worked as an office manager for about 2.5 years in a few different appraisal companies. And I was in college at the time, and I was also waiting tables at the time. I lived alone. I was young, 20, I think my first office I worked at, I was 19. And I immediately fell in love with the business. My very first job was working in the back room as what did they call us back then? A runner, or I can't remember, but we were just researchers, right? We were coloring maps and putting stickers on things. And I thought it was so amazing. And as a lifelong Orlando native, I knew these streets where the subject properties were. I knew these neighborhoods where we were going through big books of what had sold that month based on the zip code or whatever. And I fell in love with it almost immediately. So it was not difficult for me to get my license. We had to do, I believe at the time it was 75 hours, which was I think it was spread out over 2.5 weeks, maybe. I do think that the gentleman who scored my test at the time, I think he just by hand scored it. And then he just looked at me and said, "You passed." So it's not the same now as it was then. So it was not difficult for me to become a trainee. And then thereafter, I studied my tail off, and I wound up passing the certification exam in 1994. I was 21. So there you go. Yeah, it was a great profession right out the gate for a 21-year-old.
Megan, you started to talk a little bit about the process, the 75 hours, which I remember too. I remember going through the tests and then the state test and all that great stuff. But now take us to the SRA designation itself. Tonya and I are familiar, but some of our listeners may not be, and you're the freshest one out of the program. So talk to us a little bit about the Appraisal Institute's steps to getting your SRA.
In the beginning, when I first signed up, again, I think it was about 2011, and I was sitting in one of the classes for my CE, for my renewal. And I was hearing the same story that I had heard every 2 years over and over and over. And I just thought, I have got to learn something. I am paying this money. I am spending this time. And all I'm hearing are tacky stories that are getting maybe 1 or 2 points across. And I really want to make the most of my time and money. And I want to become an expert. And so while I sat in that class, I got online and I joined AI. And in the beginning, it was really difficult to get some of my classes in. We didn't have the efficiency of Zoom. We weren't as digital as we are today. And so I was having to travel to take classes. I was riveted by the curriculum. I loved live classes, because with lots of people in a class, even if it's not lots of people, the interaction is such that our brains make concrete folds and connections and synapse, connectivity. But it wasn't until I met Riley Jones, our current chapter president, and started doing appraisal work for him that he was like, "Come on, Megs, you gotta just wrap it up, head down, get it done." And so this last, basically a year and a half ago, I just signed up for my last requirement, which was my demonstration of knowledge. And so I took the advanced residential report writing course last Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that was the second to the last thing I needed to do. The last thing being that I needed to get my log and my hours in. And I let that intimidate me, and I didn't have to. I'm so glad that I got it done. It wasn't as daunting as it felt like it was going to be. So they ask you to sign off, of course, that you have 2,000 hours of experience, which in 30 years, you better bet I have that much experience. And then, just filling out the pre-printed form that they gave you. And you just have to be able to present 500 of those hours. And so, if you haven't gathered by now, I'm extremely ADHD, and I have to chunk things into small groups in order to get through them. And so when I figured out that it was really only 500 hours that I needed, and I set a personal goal to just sit down and log 100 hours a day, which is literally, a few appraisals. And then I got it in. And then, so that's the second to the last thing, right? That's the second to the last. So the third thing I had to do that I committed to doing last year was the demonstration of knowledge. So I took the course with Dana Thornberry, and it was excellent. She made me want to become an instructor. So that's tooling around up in here. And I did it through the synchronous class, which no, it's not live, but because as you said earlier, am the fun one, figured out how to pull aside study groups through our own Zoom calls. And we studied together and we answered each other's questions and we supported each other. And so that support was still there. So once I got through that and passed that with what seemed like flying colors, then I had to do my log and I got all of that together. And then the last step was doing my interview. And I got to do that with Mr. Woody Fincham. And it was a delight. And since he's just totally be this. He just is this quiet, magnanimous creature. And he gave me incredible insight on my reports. And so the process not only was beneficial because I passed and I got through and have the designation now, but I wound up connecting with all of these people who I literally rely on now. So it was fantastic.
Have you ever met them in person?
No. And I really this has inspired in me a real drive to get more involved, especially on a national level. I have a real interest in hopefully being tapped for LDAC even though I'm not young, for my chapter. I want to start going to some of the national conferences where I hadn't before. Now I really feel like I've got skin in the game and there's reason for me to, and that, I'm going to keep meeting great and amazing people. So yeah, I would really love to meet, all of these people that have influenced me along the way.
3 things, Megan. 1 statement, 2 questions. 1, I can already tell in the 20 minutes that we've talked that you'd be perfect for LDAC. So definitely pursue that. Just make sure at your chapter level that they know that you want to go and you'll go. So I think you'll love it and you'll be perfect for it. Second, you mentioned all the classes that you have to travel to and things like that. And I did the same. I packed them in a little bit closer than you did. I went to Chicago and Indianapolis and San Diego. I just tried to do it all in 1 year. And that's not possible for somebody with children. I totally understand. But this is a question maybe for Tonia too. Can you try to test out of things anymore, or is that no longer an option?
I think you can. If you've taken the course somewhere else, you can take the exam. I believe that's still an option. I don't recommend it. I recommend that you take the course and complete the exam. I have friends who have tried to test out of it just by taking the exam, and they haven't been very successful. One thing about Appraisal Institute designated members who are instructors for the program, they give you their all. They teach you. It's not just instructing you. They teach you the material. They sit there and they go over with you until you understand it. And you don't get that when you're trying to do it on your own. So I don't know, Megan, if you've thought about taking any courses, exams, or if you've done that, but what are your opinions on it?
I think because the reason I'm a member is that I'm driven to learn about these topics. I suppose if one of the requirements was something I had done before, which, by the way, I had taken the first part of the advanced residential report writing several years ago. That's where I met President Adamatis, and she taught that class so beautifully. I learned so much in that class. I had taken it before, but I had to take it again this time. And maybe at the beginning I thought, well, do I have to take it again since I already took it? Even though when you take that class, they tell you straight up, don't think you can just take part 2 without part 1 consecutively. I maybe would have asked, but I got just as much out of it the second time that I took it as I did the first. So, it's that interaction with the instructors that I find is so rewarding. So yeah, I don't really want to clip out of any of them.
Now, Warren, I want to give you a little update on LDAC. This year, I think they're doing a little different with LDAC. It's going to be, of course, the LDAC where they have the 125 participants who are part of that lobbying and roundtable discussion. But in addition to that, the Appraisal Institute's asking members to come down to Washington to help them lobby, similar to what NAR does, where they just, shall we say, storm the hill or, go up there and in droves. Of course, that'll be on our own dime if we decide to go to Washington and lobby, but I think it's a great opportunity for members across the country to go and one, you get to lobby and discuss topics that affect appraisers and try to fight for additional rights or our, point of views and to try to help other appraisers on a national basis. But two, it just provides you such a great ability to network. I remember being at LDAC. It was where I met Woody Fincham. He is an amazing, amazing person. So Megan, I do recommend you meet him, especially in addition with the other people you mentioned. But I ask that our members, including, the three of us here, go down to Washington and help support the Appraisal Institute and march on the Hill and lobby some of these, bills or acts that are favorable or not to appraisers. So, that's one of the opportunities that the Appraisal Institute is going to give all of us this year, which I think is an amazing opportunity.
Tonya, I did hear about that. And to take it even a step further, didn't I hear that even non-members, people outside of the Appraisal Institute are invited? I mean, appraisers, I think, which would be a great recruitment tool for the Appraisal Institute to get together with those appraisers out there that aren't currently affiliated with the Appraisal Institute to kind of go hand in hand lobbying for appraiser issues. I thought I heard that.
Yes, I believe you're correct. I believe it's going to be open to all appraisers. So it's a to be continued. Stay tuned for the updates coming from the Appraisal Institute, but those will be coming shortly. We're almost in January. So in the next couple months, we'll be hearing more about that. So I can't wait to hear. And Megan, I hope to meet you there, even if you're not participating in LDAC, to meet you there for the lobbying and networking abilities that we're going to have.
Absolutely. And I wanted to touch on that advocacy portion, something that I didn't necessarily realize Appraisal Institute was doing for me when I wasn't a member. They're advocating for the profession. And so whether you're a member or not, they're trying to make our lives better. They're working on policy matters and issues. We just saw the message from President Adamatis a couple of weeks ago regarding the campaign that HUD has put out that is kind of smearing appraisers a little bit. And, so to feel like the organization has my profession's back, not just mine, but all of ours, has also been a very comforting new relationship that I've been feeling with the Institute just over this last year that I've become involved.
I'd also suggest to you, Megan, that if you're in Florida and if they have some kind of coalition amongst other membership organizations, to get involved with that as well. I'm not trying to put too much on your plate right away, but I have myself been really involved with the Colorado Coalition of Appraisers and met wonderful appraisers that aren't affiliated with the Appraisal Institute. And some of them actually have, based on meeting many of us from the Appraisal Institute, have then got on their pursuit to get their SRA. So it's a great thing to do at our level here in Colorado. Our CCA here in Colorado is pretty tight knit now. It used to be kind of non-existent, and now we're a very tight knit group.
Okay, that sounds great. I love my local chapter. It was funny because when I first started going to meetings back in 2011, I think I went to 2, and they were so stuffy and they were so boring, and it was all commercial heavy. And I didn't know what I was doing there. I didn't understand a word they were saying. And now, while it is still extremely commercial heavy, I'm not the only residential person there. I am the one that, they tend to run over to and go, "What do you think about this?" Because I'll say it, but it is much warmer. It is much more social. We talk about engagement in the community. We talk about engagement with other appraisers and what are we fighting here on the ground? What's the biggest issue? I met my trainee there who, at my very first luncheon, I was like, "You are smart. You're great. Come talk to me." And, it's just been, the connections on the local level have been great, but I will look for that. I will look for a Florida coalition.
And if there isn't one, create one.
Now, Megan, what about time, effort, money? I know when I went through my designation, when I added up all the costs between travel, hotel stays, the courses. I think it was about $30,000 I had spent, and that was well over probably 15 years ago. Throughout your process, did you tally up the cost for getting your designation? And do you think the cost is outweighed by the benefit that you're now receiving, able to do those legal appraisals and getting more work from those lawyers you were talking about?
Well, I'm going to tell you that I am not that girl. I am very rarely looking at my own bottom line, if ever. So I do what I want when I want, consequences be damned, and they do exist. So I don't know what it ended up costing me altogether. I don't think it was that much, and likely because I did wait and do a large bulk of the education towards the end so that I wouldn't have to travel. And I did take those synchronous classes. And because the SRA designation is so new to me, I cannot say that I have instantaneously gotten a boost in business because of it. I just got the designation mid to late October. At that time, we were dealing with the hurricanes where I live secondarily, which is North Carolina and the area that was affected. And then here, we had to deal with them coming here. So I haven't been as focused on how much work has popped up. It's only been a month and a half since I got that designation. But I'd say for me right now, the big payoff has been the networking and the connections that I've made. I think a lot more people know who I am. All of a sudden, I am on one of the president's projects, special projects that happened immediately. And so I know it's paid off intrinsically for me. I'm proud. I feel almost like before I was designated, I felt like I was like at the top of my game here in Orlando. And then I got the designation and started meeting these people who have opened up a whole new world to me of practice. And now I feel just like the smallest person in the corner of a room of really big, bright, impressive, fantastic people. And I'm glad to be in the room, and I cannot wait to see where it's going to go. It feels all good, but it hasn't been enough time yet for me to start turning that investment into my own dollars. That's just going to take some time.
But you did allude to earlier, Megan, that in a courtroom setting, it's almost a must to have your SRA, correct? Would you say for that reason alone, forget about money? If you're going to be doing that type of work, it's a must.
Yeah. And I mean, not to say that I wasn't doing it for the last 12 years without it, because I was. I had to work really, really hard to show my talent in that aspect, in the expert witness aspect, because I didn't have that designation. I'm hoping this is going to help me relax a little bit, because not everybody, especially in this market, when the market's down, people who lose lender work start looking for other opportunities, and they branch out into non-lender work and private work and litigation support, and they're not prepared. And I know that because I was that person for a hot minute. But that was when I was hungry, and I really, really, really crafted my expertise in what I did so that I could answer those judges clearly, so that I could answer the counsel's questions directly. And so I anticipate this is really going to help significantly in that aspect.
See, on the commercial side of things, I don't know many commercial appraisers who are not affiliated with the Appraisal Institute. I don't know if it's because I'm in a big city or whether it's the large companies that are around us, but I don't know any commercial appraisers who are not affiliated. They may not be designated, but they attend meetings for the networking, or they take their courses, or they work in a firm that has designated appraisers. But on the commercial end, I think there's a greater knowledge of the designation. I really want our residential members to know that we're here for them, that there is a huge networking ability, and the education is the best, and it will be the best.
So that alone is a pretty important barometer, I think, of your seriousness about the profession. And then it's probably a lot more competitive. And so having that alliance with, or that affiliation with the Appraisal Institute has got to be helpful. I don't know why residential appraisers, other than I didn't always see relevant education for residential appraisers as often. I had talked at one point in about joining ASA also. And I recently reached out to someone I admire who is a member over there. And he just honestly said, I don't know that it's going to get you anywhere because it is so commercial focused. But I know that AI really wants to clarify that they are the leader in education for all appraisers. I think that they've really made some great advancements in their residential offerings. When I look back at all of the offices I've worked in, the one that initially got me in as a researcher, my mom's best friend, that's how I got into this business. The office that trained me, the two offices I worked at after I left that office that were very brief stints. I'm the only one out of all the appraisers in all of those offices that's gone ahead and gotten their designation. And when I mean, and that's no fault of, I mean, who knows why people do what they do, but I just know that you've got to make your own opportunities sometimes. You've got to present yourself and put yourself up to be open to the opportunity. And when our market is so fickle and we're so reliant on the economy for business and we're cutting each other's throats over fees, I just feel like this is actually a far more rewarding path to take than to try to be scrapping away for those horrible, $250 appraisals.
To the residential appraisers, there's a lot more opportunity out there once you have the designation. It opens up a lot of it opens up a lot of doors that we may not have had the ability to open before. Legal disputes, matrimony, accountants need our services, and not just the AMCs and the mortgage lender work that are the lower cut, where people are cutting throats at getting those lower fees, but you'll have some of the work that requires a little more skill, a little more finesse, a little more knowledge, understanding of the legal environment. And I think that's where the SRAs have the opportunity right now to grow and expand and take over the market.
And to those appraisers out there that do only want to continue to do mortgage work, I will tell you that your clients have this list of approved appraisers and they have your credentials on there. And when that property comes up that's a little more complex, probably requires a little more experience, they're going to look to those people that have the SRA, and guess what? The fee will be higher. So even if you do want to just stick with mortgage work, there's a reason for getting your designation for that reason alone.
I'll tell you, that's a lot of the work that I do is the complex stuff that nobody else wants. And I've always taken it since I opened my business. When I opened my business in 2001, I was 30. I had just gotten married. I knew that as a foundation of my values for this business, I was not going to cherry pick appraisals. I was appraisal orders. I was an appraiser and I was going to appraise and I was going to charge my worth. And that actually was a real benefit to me when I had to fill out my experience log. A lot of my appraisals were 10, 12, 15 hours because I take the hard ones and I charge for the hard ones. It's very rewarding.
My favorite saying, Megan, somebody's got to do it. You get that order or that bid from a client that you know the address. You're like, ooh, I don't want that one. But then you think to yourself, well, somebody has to do it. This job has to be done. So when you talk about the ones that take you 12, 15 hours, maybe a lot more than you're used to, if you charge for it, then great. But somebody's got to do that assignment. Why not you?
It makes you a better appraiser. Right? You learn when these are tough, you're learning and you're getting better. And then people start coming to you, you become established. It's not, this is basic stuff, nobody gets, something for nothing.
Well, Megan, thank you so much for coming on our podcast today and talking about your recent designation and the steps you had to go through to get there. We really appreciate having this discussion, and we hope that you've reached out. We hope that this podcast can reach out to a lot of the appraisers out there who are on the fence about getting the designation or just becoming affiliated with the Appraisal Institute. Come on over, take a look, see if it's for you, see if you like it, see if you meet new people.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Megan, and thank you to our listeners. There is a whole bunch in the archives now that you can go back and listen to. So make sure you hit them all. We have more to come. And go to Spotify and YouTube to subscribe and watch or listen. And if someone were to have an idea, Tonia, about an upcoming podcast, how might they let us know?
Yes, everyone, please email us your ideas, or if you'd like to be a guest on Face Value Podcast, and send that over to facevalue@appraisalinstitute.org.